My wife had been gone for 7 months when I found the tapes. 7 months since cancer hollowed out our house and left behind only echoes, medicine bottles, and a 17-year-old daughter who looked at me as if I had personally signed the papers that took her mother away. 7 months of doors shutting harder than necessary. 7 months of one-word answers. 7 months of hearing my own name in her voice and still somehow sounding like a stranger to her. Before I tell you what happened when I pressed play, let me say this. Grief changes the air in a house. It makes the walls listen. It turns the silence into something physical. If you have ever lived through that kind of silence, then you already know what I mean. And if you are listening tonight, tell me where you are listening from. I have learned there are people carrying these kinds of stories everywhere. Leave your city in the comments and stay with me. My name is Daniel Foster. I am 49 years old, and until last year I believed I understood what it meant to lose something. I did not. Not really. I knew about losing jobs, losing money, losing sleep, losing a father too early and pretending I had handled it better than I had. But none of that prepared me for losing Marianne. She had been the center of our home in ways I did not fully appreciate until the center disappeared. She was the translator between me and our daughter, Isabel. She could take one of my practical, clumsy sentences and somehow turn it into something a teenager could actually hear. She could take Isabel's storms and find the meaning underneath them. She was warmth without weakness, discipline without cruelty, the kind of woman who could make a grocery list sound affectionate. When she died, the whole house seemed to lose its grammar. Isabel blamed me, not politely, not indirectly, not in the subtle, sophisticated way adults blame each other while pretending they do not. She blamed me the way only a teenager can, with full force and no breaks. "You stopped fighting," she had screamed at me the night after the funeral, standing in the kitchen in the same black dress she had worn to the service, her mascara smeared under both eyes. You just let her go. You let them tell you there was nothing left to do, and you listened. I had tried to tell her that I had not listened because I was weak. I had listened because Marianne had asked me to. Because there comes a point in certain battles when love stops looking like rescue and starts looking like release. But Isabel did not want nuance. She wanted a villain. Cancer is too abstract to hate properly. Doctors are too distant. God is too silent. I was right there in front of her. So I became the shape her anger could take. We moved around each other like survivors in the aftermath of a fire, careful not to step on anything fragile. She left for school every morning with earbuds in and her backpack half zipped, never saying goodbye. I learned to ask smaller questions. Did you eat? Do you need a ride? What time will you be home? Even those got one-word replies, when they got replies at all. Our house in Madison had once felt crowded in the best possible way. Marianne's laugh from the kitchen, Isabel practicing violin badly and enthusiastically upstairs. My voice calling that dinner was ready. After Marianne died, the place felt over-furnished and empty at the same time. Her scarf still hung on the hall rack. Her gardening gloves were still by the back door. Her novels remained stacked on the nightstand in our room, one of them still face down where she had left it when the pain medication made reading impossible. Every room held an unfinished sentence. The grief counselor I had been seeing every other Thursday kept telling me the same thing in her calm, unoffended way. "You do not have to erase Marianne," she said. "But you do have to begin sorting what is memory and what is paralysis." I knew she was right. I also hated her for being right. I put it off as long as I could. Then one cold Sunday in February, with a sleet-colored sky hanging low over the neighborhood, and Isabel spending the afternoon at her friend Tessa's house, I finally opened the bedroom door, pulled 3 empty storage bins into the hallway, and told myself I would begin. I started with the easy things, the practical things. Expired prescriptions, hospital paperwork, scarves she never really wore, the stack of sympathy cards that had kept arriving for weeks after the funeral, each one another reminder that the world expects grief to be sorted, acknowledged, and placed somewhere manageable. I made piles without feeling much of anything at first. Donation, storage, trash. It felt mechanical, which was a relief. Then every so often I would find something that stopped me. A movie stub tucked inside an old receipt book from the summer we met. A shopping list in her neat slanted handwriting that said tomatoes, basil, coffee, birthday candles. A pressed yellow leaf between the pages of a cookbook. A cheap silver barrette Isabel used to steal when she was little because she wanted to look like Mom when she teaches. Each item opened some hidden door in me and stood there waiting. By the time I got to the closet, I was exhausted. Marianne kept things in careful order. Shoes by season, sweaters arranged by color, small boxes on the top shelf labeled in black marker, winter scarves, tax files, photos before 2010. I dragged over the folding step stool, climbed up, and reached for a plain brown shoebox pushed farther back than the others, almost hidden behind a stack of old board games. It was lighter than I expected. Inside were cassette tapes, not 2 or 3, a whole collection. 13 of them, lined up in order, each in its plastic case, each labeled in Marianne's handwriting with a number and a date. Tape 1, Tape 2, Tape 3. The first date was from 10 months before she died, around the time Dr. Patel had gently stopped talking about remission and started talking about comfort. The last one was dated 9 days before she passed. For a second, I honestly smiled. I thought they were mixtapes. That was such a Marianne thing to do. She loved old songs, loved the idea that music could preserve a moment better than photographs. When we were in college, she used to make me tapes with handwritten track lists and ridiculous titles like For Driving Too Fast in the Rain or For Remembering That Tuesday in October. I assumed I had found some late secret project of hers, maybe songs for Isabel, maybe old favorites she wanted saved. I carried the box downstairs to the living room. On the lowest shelf of the built-in bookcase sat an ancient tape player we had kept for no rational reason, except that Marianne could never throw out anything that still worked. It was dark gray, slightly scratched, and smelled faintly of dust and old plastic when I plugged it in. I sat on the couch, picked up tape 1, slid it into the machine, and pressed play. I expected piano, or Joni Mitchell, or the sound of a badly recorded radio DJ talking over the intro of some 70s song Marianne loved. Instead, I heard my wife say, very clearly, "Daniel, if you are hearing this first, that means you found them before Izzy did." My hand froze on the edge of the player. There was a tiny rustle on the recording, like she had adjusted the microphone, and then her voice again, warm and unmistakable. "That's probably for the best. You were always going to screen them before she heard them. I married a man who reads the side effects on children's cough syrup and calls the pediatrician if the print seems too small. Of course you were going to listen first." I sat down hard. Marianne laughed softly on the tape, and hearing that laugh after 7 months felt like someone had opened a door in the middle of winter and let sunlight pour through it. "These are for Isabel," she said. "Mostly. But some of them are for you, too, whether you want to admit that or not. I started recording them after Dr. Patel told us the treatment had stopped helping and had started mostly hurting. I knew I was running out of time, and there were too many things I still wanted to say." My throat tightened so suddenly I could barely breathe. She kept talking, steady and intimate, as if she were sitting in the chair across from me with a blanket around her shoulders. "I know our girl," she said. "I know she's going to be angry. At me for leaving. At you because you're here. At the world for being cruel and random and completely unimpressed by how much we need it to be fair. That is all right. Anger is grief with its shoes on. It stomps around because standing still hurts too much." I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, both hands pressed together so tightly my knuckles hurt. "I want her to know," Marianne said, "that you are not the reason I am gone. You are one of the reasons I got to stay as long as I did. And I want her to know that if she turns you into the enemy, she is turning away from the person who loves her most in the world." She paused. I could hear a small inhale, thinner than it used to be, the breath of someone already tired in her bones. "Daniel," she said, and now she was speaking directly to me. "If she hates you for a while, let her. Do not make her feel guilty for grieving badly. There is no elegant version of this for a 17-year-old girl who is losing her mother, but do not leave her alone in it either. Keep showing up. Even when she makes it hard, especially then." The tape went on for almost 45 minutes. Marianne told Isabel about being 16 herself, about slamming doors in her parents' house in Cedar Rapids because she was convinced no one understood her. She told the story of the time she dyed her own hair with a pharmacy kit and came out orange 2 days before a school dance. She talked about wanting to be a poet, then a journalist, then a teacher, then all three at once. She laughed at her own younger certainty. She told Isabel that growing up did not mean becoming less passionate. It meant learning where to place that passion so it did not burn down everything around you. And scattered through all of it were these little offerings about me. "Your father once drove 2 hours in a thunderstorm because I mentioned over the phone that I had a fever and no medicine in the apartment. Your father learned how to French braid when you were 9 because you said regular ponytails made you look like a substitute teacher. Your father is the kind of man who remembers which of your friends hates olives and which one is afraid of thunderstorms." I was crying before the first tape ended. Not gracefully, not silently. Shoulders bent forward, face in my hands, crying the way men do when no one is there to see whether they are doing it right. When it clicked off, I sat there for a long moment in the sudden quiet. Then I put in tape 2. This one was different. Marianne talked more about herself, about her childhood, about the version of her that existed before me and before motherhood. She told Isabel about notebooks filled with stories she used to keep under her bed, about the summer she worked in a bakery and secretly wrote poems on the backs of inventory slips, about how she thought she was going to become a novelist and how terrified she was when life chose a smaller, steadier shape. I thought choosing to teach middle school English meant I had failed some grander version of myself, she said. But then I met your father, and he looked at me like I had just announced I was going to change the weather. He believed in every dream I had, even the dreams I quietly abandoned. She laughed again, lighter this time. He read all my terrible poems, all of them. There were so many metaphors about rain, Izzy. An irresponsible amount of rain. By the third tape, I was not just grieving. I was learning things. Marianne spoke about her mother with a tenderness I had never heard fully articulated, about the ways women pass strength down in unglamorous packages, about shame, about ambition, about the years when she worried motherhood had swallowed parts of her whole, only to discover later that some forms of love do not erase you. They stretch you. On tape 4, she talked about Isabel as a little girl, about the year she insisted on wearing fairy wings to the grocery store in December, about the hand-drawn museum tickets she made for guests entering her bedroom, about the time she cut the cat's whiskers because she thought he would feel less itchy. I laughed out loud at that, then cried again because I could hear Isabel at 6 in Marianne's voice so vividly it almost hurt. On tape 5, Marianne talked about art. That one stopped me because it was where I first heard the shape of the daughter I had almost lost to grief. "Your paintings," Marianne said, "are not hobbies, sweetheart. They are how you make sense of chaos. Do not let anyone convince you that only things that earn money deserve seriousness. Art is work. Feeling deeply is not laziness. But please, for the love of God, finish high school chemistry before announcing you're moving to Paris to live on croissants and genius." She laughed at herself, then went softer. "You are so much like me it startles me sometimes. The same quick temper, the same tenderness you try to hide because you think softness makes you vulnerable. It doesn't. It makes you brave enough to care." Tape 6 broke me. That was the one where Marianne spoke directly about her illness, and the accusation Isabel had hurled at me the night after the funeral. "I know you are probably angry with your father," she said. "Maybe furious. Maybe convinced he stopped too soon or accepted too much. Maybe you think if he had loved me harder or pushed harder or begged louder, I would still be here." I had to pause the tape, because I remembered that conversation in the hospice room near the end, the late afternoon light, the oxygen tubing. The way Marianne's fingers had become so light in mine, I was afraid to squeeze too hard. She had looked at me and said, with complete calm, "No more hospitals, Dan. Please. I am done being a project everyone is trying to save." I had argued. God, I had argued. I brought up trials in Chicago, a doctor at Northwestern, a study I had found at 3 in the morning. She listened to me the way you listen to someone standing in the rain when you are already too tired to ask them to come in. Then she said, "You are asking me to stay because you cannot imagine me gone. I understand that. But I am asking you to love me enough to stop." There is no victory in a conversation like that. Only surrender or selfishness. When I pressed play again, Marianne's voice was quieter. "The truth is," she said, "your father wanted more time than I did. He wanted every impossible miracle. He would have carried me to the moon himself if someone had suggested the right treatment was up there. I was the one who said enough. I was the one who asked to come home. I was the one who said, 'Let me go while I am still myself.'" A long pause. "Do not punish him for honoring me, and do not turn his love into evidence against him." By the time I got through tape 8, the room had darkened around me. I had not turned on any lamps. Snow was starting outside, feathering against the windows in slow, diagonal lines. The tape cases were spread across the coffee table. My face hurt from crying. My chest hurt from hearing her. And beneath all of it, something else had begun to stir. Not relief exactly, hope, thin as thread, fragile as the first sound after a storm. The front door opened a little after 6. I heard Isabel come in, drop her backpack in the hallway, call a distracted hi to no one in particular, and stop when she saw me in the living room. She stood in the doorway, one hand still on the strap of her bag, and frowned. "What happened?" Her eyes moved from my face to the tapes on the coffee table. "What are those?" I looked at her, and for the first time in months, I did not just see my angry daughter. I saw Marianne in the line of her jaw, in the restless intelligence in her eyes, in the way she pushed hair behind one ear when she was unsettled. "Your mom made them," I said. Isabel did not move. "What do you mean she made them?" "She recorded these for you. For us. I found them in the closet." Her face changed so fast it nearly undid me. Suspicion, hope, fear. Then a kind of disbelief so intense it looked painful. "For me?" I picked up tape 1. "They're all labeled. She started making them last spring." Isabel's mouth parted, then closed again. "Can I hear one?" It was such a careful question, as if she were asking for something rare and breakable that might be snatched away if she reached too fast. "Of course," I said. "I was thinking maybe we could listen together." She hesitated. For 7 months, she had been living inside a fortress built from anger. To come sit beside me on that couch, to hear Marianne's voice with me, would mean lowering the drawbridge. Not forever, just for an hour. But even that is terrifying when grief has become part of your armor. Finally, she crossed the room and sat on the opposite end of the couch, shoulders rigid, hands tucked into the sleeves of her sweater. "Start at the beginning," she said. I rewound tape 1 and pressed play. Marianne's voice filled the room. "Hi, my beautiful girl." That was all it took. Isabel made a small sound, not quite a sob, more like the body's involuntary recognition of something it had been starving for. Her hand flew to her mouth. Her shoulders curled inward. "If you're listening to this," Marianne went on, "it means I couldn't stay long enough to tell you everything in person. I hate that. I hate it more than I can explain. but I want you to hear me anyway. I want you to hear that I love you more than every book I have ever read, more than every song I ever played in the kitchen, more than every ordinary Tuesday we got together that I did not know would one day seem holy." Isabel was crying openly now. I did not touch her at first. I let the voice reach her before I did. Marianne told the story of Isabel's first day of kindergarten when she wore rain boots in 80-degree weather because she said they made her look academically serious. She told the story of the backyard fairy village, of the year Isabel insisted every stuffed animal deserved its own birthday cake, of the winter fever when she slept on the rug beside Isabel's bed because every time she tried to leave the room, Isabel woke up and panicked. Then Marianne said, "Your father was the one who held you upright in the bathtub when your fever got too high. He was the one who learned the exact way you wanted your toast cut. He was the one who sat on the floor next to your bed at 3 in the morning and made up stories about brave rabbits because he was too tired to remember real ones." I felt Isabel shift, not away, toward me. By the time the first tape ended, she had folded into my side so slowly I had not even noticed the moment it happened. When the player clicked off, she stayed there, face against my sweater, crying like the last 7 months had all arrived at once. "She remembered everything," she whispered. "She always did," I said, wrapping both arms around her. "That was your mom. She remembered people properly. Play another one." So we did. We listened to tape 2 there in the darkening living room with the snow falling harder outside and the heat clicking on beneath the windows. Marianne talked about being 16 and impossible, about thinking heartbreak would kill her, about being wrong. She told Isabel it was all right to not know who she was yet. "It is all right to be unfinished," she said. "Most interesting people stay unfinished for a very long time." Tape 3 was about me and Marianne meeting in college. According to her version, I was carrying too many library books and walked straight into a potted ficus because I had been staring at her instead of where I was going. This is, regrettably, true. "Your father looked so offended by the existence of the ficus," Marianne said, laughing, "like the tree had personally chosen that moment to undermine him." Isabel actually laughed through her tears. "Did that happen?" "Unfortunately." Tape 4 was about family. Tape 5 about art and ambition. Tape 6 about illness. Tape 7 about fear. Tape 8 about love that outlives form. On one of them, Marianne said, "Your father is patient in a way that can be infuriating if you are in a hurry to feel dramatic. He will sit through your worst mood and still ask if you've eaten. He will keep showing up long after other people would demand gratitude. That kind of love does not look flashy. It looks like consistency." I felt Isabel go still. Then, very quietly, "I was awful to you. You were grieving. I said horrible things." I swallowed before answering. "Yes, you did." She started crying again. Harder this time. The kind of crying that has shame tangled into it. I held her and said, "You were hurting. That does not make the words not hurt, but it means we know where they came from." We listened until almost midnight. By the 4th tape together, Isabel's body had lost its rigidness. She sat curled under the throw blanket Marianne always used, holding one of the tape cases like an artifact. By the 6th, she had rested her head against my shoulder. By the 8th, she was asking questions between pauses. Did Mom really want to be a writer? She wrote stories in yellow notebooks in college. I still have them. She really made you read all of them? All of them. Some of them twice. One of them involved a woman who fell in love with a lighthouse. Isabel snorted through tears. That sounds like Mom. It really does. At 11:47, when I stood to turn off the lamp and gather the tapes, Isabel looked at me and said, "Dad, I'm sorry." Not dramatically, not as a grand reconciliation, just honestly, from somewhere exhausted and newly unguarded. I sat back down beside her. You don't have to apologize for being heartbroken, I said. But I blamed you. I know. She said you fought for her. I closed my eyes for a second. I did. I know that now. And then she leaned into me again, and for the first time since Marianne's funeral, I felt like I was holding my daughter instead of trying not to lose her too. That night changed the house. Not all at once. Healing almost never happens in one cinematic sweep. But something real shifted. The following Sunday, Isabel came downstairs at 7 carrying 2 mugs of hot chocolate and said, "Are we listening tonight?" That became our ritual. Every Sunday evening, we sat in the living room, made popcorn or cocoa or whatever small comfort the weather demanded, and played one tape. Not because we had to ration them anymore. We had already heard them all once by then, but because Marianne's voice had become more than memory. It had become a kind of map. Tape 9 was the hardest. Marianne spoke about dying, not abstractly, not poetically, plainly. "I am going to miss things," she said. "Your graduation, your first apartment, the possibility of your wedding if you choose that. The version of you at 25 I will never get to meet. There is no brave way to say that without admitting it breaks me." Isabel cried so hard during that tape she had to pause it twice. I cried too, but Marianne did not leave us there. "Listen to me," she said. "Love does not end because a body does. It changes jobs. That is all. It becomes memory, instinct, courage, the voice in your head that says, 'Call home, be kinder, keep going.' If you let it, it will still raise you." Tape 10 stunned us. Instead of Marianne speaking, we heard the gentle opening chords of the old upright piano in our dining room, the one Isabel had not touched since the funeral. Marianne had recorded herself playing and singing a song she had written for Isabel. Not polished, not studio perfect. Better than that. Intimate. A voice thinner from treatment but steady, carrying words that felt handmade. "My bright-eyed girl, when the night gets longer, when your room feels far too wide, look for me in morning windows. I will still be by your side. Look for me in pages turning, in the color on your hands, in the brave things you keep making, in the life you hadn't planned." Isabel clutched my arm so tightly it hurt, and I was grateful for the pain because it gave me somewhere to put what I was feeling. "She wrote me a song," she whispered. "Yes. She wrote me a song." By the end of it, we were both crying so hard we could barely breathe. "When you were little," I said, "she used to sing in the kitchen when you had nightmares. You used to fall asleep in the doorway just listening." "I forgot," Isabel said. "She didn't want you to." Tape 11 was full of favorite memories. Our wedding day, the tiny apartment where the ceiling leaked over the stove, Isabel's birth, Sunday mornings with blueberry pancakes, family road trips where everyone got sunburned and fought over the map and laughed anyway. "The best parts of a life," Marianne said, "are usually the parts no one thinks to document. The ride home after the party, the joke that gets repeated too many times, the way someone you love looks up from a book when they hear your key in the door. Do not wait for milestone moments to understand that a life is happening." Tape 12 felt like a benediction. Her voice was weaker, more effortful. I could hear the disease in the spaces between words. "This may be the last one I can manage," she said. Isabel reached for my hand before the tape had even gone on. Marianne spoke to both of us. To Isabel, "Your father is going to be lost for a while. He will pretend he is fine because he has spent his whole life believing steadiness means silence. Do not mistake his quiet for distance. He loves you in ways that will outlast both of us." To me, "She is going to push you away. Do not accept that as final. Keep knocking, keep asking, keep embarrassing her by being loyal." Then she said the thing that stayed with me longer than almost anything else. "Promise me you two will not build a shrine out of my absence. Build a life. Bring me with you, but keep moving." At the very end, she hummed the melody from Isabel's song, just a few bars, barely more than a breath carrying tune. Then the tape clicked off. The silence afterward was unlike the silence we had lived in before. That old silence had been full of accusation, avoidance, swallowed words. This one was full of her. In the months that followed, Isabel and I began, carefully, to rebuild. She started painting again. She had not touched a brush since Marianne went into hospice. One Saturday, I came home from the hardware store and found the dining room table covered in sketch paper, paints, jars of cloudy water, and a half-finished portrait of Marianne as a young woman in a green coat, laughing at something outside the frame. Isabel looked up like she had been caught doing something private. "It's for AP portfolio work," she said too quickly. "It's beautiful," I said. She shrugged, but she was blushing. Over the next few weeks, more paintings appeared. Marianne at 20. Marianne holding newborn Isabel. Marianne in the garden with dirt on her knees. Then one large canvas propped against the wall in Isabel's room that made me stand in the doorway longer than I meant to. It was Marianne at the piano, head tipped back slightly, mouth open in song, sunlight turning the edges of her hair almost gold. "She looks alive," I said. Isabel did not look up from the brush in her hand. "She is." I started writing. Not fiction, not anything grand. Just letters to Marianne in a notebook I kept in the drawer by the bed. I wrote about Isabel's college brochures spread over the kitchen table, about the way she had started saying goodnight again, about my own failures, the stupid practical things I still could not figure out, how much I hated grocery shopping alone, how sometimes I still reached across the bed at 2 in the morning and forgot. I never showed the letters to anyone. I do not know if that matters. Writing them pulled words out of me that grief had been keeping submerged. We kept our Sundays. Even after we had heard every tape 3 and 4 times, we still sat down and played one. Sometimes Isabel would choose the song. Sometimes the one where Marianne talked about art. Sometimes the one where she defended me so plainly that I still had to look away. One evening in late summer, about 6 months after finding the tapes, Isabel came into the kitchen while I was making pasta and said, "I want to record something." I looked up. "What kind of something?" "A tape. For Mom." I put down the wooden spoon. "What would you say?" She shrugged, but her eyes were bright. "Everything. School. The portfolio review. That stupid boy from history class. How terrible you are at folding fitted sheets. The fact that I finally get why she liked rainy days. I know she can't hear it, not literally. I want to answer her." So we set up the old recorder in the living room. Isabel sat cross-legged on the rug with the microphone in her hand, Marianne's tapes stacked beside her like witnesses. "Hi, Mom," she said, and then had to stop because the tears came too quickly. I started to say we could do it another night, but she shook her head. "No, I want to do it now." So she did. For nearly an hour, she talked to Marianne about junior year, about her art teacher encouraging her to apply to RISD summer programs, about the way grief still hit without warning in grocery store aisles and at red lights, and when she smelled lemon hand lotion on strangers, about how angry she had been, and how ashamed of that anger she sometimes felt now. Then she said something that made me turn away so she would not see my face. "I blamed Dad because if I blamed cancer, I had nowhere to put it. He was here, and cancer wasn't. I know that's not fair. I know you already know that. But I needed to say it out loud." At the end of the recording, she picked up the old acoustic guitar Marianne used to keep by the piano bench. It was out of tune. Isabel fixed it by ear. Then she sang. Not Marianne's song, her own. "Thank you for the light you left us, for the words I almost missed, for the way you kept on loving through the dark and through the distance. When I paint, I hear you breathing. When I sing, I hear you too. And the world feels less like ending when I still belong to you." Her voice cracked twice. She kept going. I sat on the couch with both hands over my mouth and let my daughter become, in that moment, exactly who Marianne had known she would become. After Isabel finished, she looked at me and said, "Your turn." I almost said no. Then I thought of Marianne telling me on tape 1 that I would screen them because I was always trying to protect everyone. She had known me too well to let me hide. So I sat down in front of the recorder. "Hi, love," I said. My voice sounded older than I expected. I told Marianne about the man I was trying to become without her, about the father I had almost failed to remain because grief had made me so quiet, about Isabel's paintings and how sometimes she laughed exactly the way Marianne used to laugh when she was trying not to snort. Then I said the truest thing in me. "You saved us after you were gone. I don't know how to thank you for that, except to keep doing the work you asked us to do." A year after Marianne died, the house no longer felt haunted. It still felt inhabited by her, but in a living way. Not a museum, not a shrine, just a place where her voice still had authority. We had moved some things, donated some clothes, stored others. The tape box lived on the bookshelf now, not hidden away. Isabel's painting of Marianne singing hung in the hall outside the dining room. My letters stayed in the drawer. The piano got tuned. On the anniversary of Marianne's death, Isabel and I went to the cemetery together. We brought sunflowers because they had been Marianne's favorite, shamelessly bright and impossible to ignore. Isabel also brought a small portable speaker and her phone. We stood in front of the headstone in the late afternoon light, and Isabel said, "I want to play her song." So we did. Marianne's recorded voice rose softly into the cold October air. "My bright-eyed girl, when the night gets longer." The cemetery was quiet, except for the wind in the trees. I stood with my hands in my coat pockets and listened to my dead wife sing to our daughter, and I thought how extraordinary it is that human beings keep finding ways to outlive their own endings. When the song finished, Isabel slipped her hand into mine. She had not done that in years. "I think she'd like us," she said. I swallowed. "I think she would too." "No," Isabel said, looking at the stone, at the flowers, at the sky beyond both. "I think she'd like who we became." That nearly undid me, because that was the real gift of the tapes. Not just her voice, not just the stories or the song or the explanations that freed me from my daughter's blame. It was that Marianne had somehow seen past her own death into the shape of what would come after. She knew grief would try to split us apart. She knew silence would harden if no one broke it. She knew Isabel would need permission to be angry and then permission to stop. She knew I would need instructions because loving people has never been the hard part for me. Knowing how to keep loving them when pain makes them difficult, that is the harder discipline. She left us a bridge, a roadmap, a way back. Even now, when the house is quiet, we still play the tapes sometimes. Not every Sunday now. Life has grown around the ritual the way vines grow around a fence, changing its outline without destroying it. But when one of us has a bad day, when Isabel gets overwhelmed by school or I have one of those strange grief afternoons where everything feels colorless for no reason I can name, one of us says, "Do you want to hear Mom?" And the answer is almost always yes. Because grief did not disappear. It changed shape. So did love. And if I have learned anything, it is this. The dead do not stay with us through objects alone. Not through sweaters or coffee mugs or the smell on an old scarf. They stay through what they built in us. Through the sentences we hear when we are about to say the wrong thing. Through the songs that teach us how to keep going. Through the ways they still connect the people they loved. Marianne is gone. That will always be true. But she is also here in Isabel's hands when she paints. In my voice when I try to answer carefully instead of quickly. In the old tape player that still clicks before every recording starts. in the strange and beautiful fact that the worst year of our lives did not end with a father and daughter breaking beyond repair. It ended with a voice, her voice, telling us how to find each other again.